Nithya, thank you so much for taking out the time to speak with us. And in today's interview, well, basically, I wanted to touch upon subjects like digital marketing, your own journey in, co-founding speech bulbs, and of course, the sort of industry insights around both the entrepreneurial journey of app development and also digital marketing, which is the field that you come from.
I would say the idea was born around 5 years ago. Yeah, we 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 are not like specialists in the industry, so we are not speech therapists. So at the beginning, we knew very little of the market, of the pain that parents have, of what kids go through. But we had a personal experience as children, suffering from speech delays, not being able to speak clearly, and then you get all this bullying. And basically, we met. We created the first prototype in Slovenian language. We got positive feedback. And then we just created the US version, because Slovenia is a very small country of 2 million people. So the market for selling mobile apps is almost non-existent. So we went to the US market, to the biggest one, first with the Apple app, and then also Google. Maybe a story from the beginnings, and how we got to this concept of real kids saying words and singing and so on. So yeah, basically we didn't have enough money to pay animators to create a typical children's apps where kids need to tap and they're animated characters and so on. So we were just thinking it wouldn't be cheaper to just record real kids. And then we went to the studio, and there was the first time we did shooting with kids. We saw a very interesting reaction. So we were in a studio. It was me, it was Irnei, our CEO. It was speech therapists, parents, kids. And the first video we were observing was a video of a child who's just imitating a fish. So basically doing this. And then Irnei nudged me and said, look. And I looked, and everyone in the room was doing the same thing as the boy in the video. So we kind of knew, okay, this is it. And from that moment on, I believe we managed to create this app. And then also later on, we created, basically last year, we created early literacy app for small kids to learn, to get stories, because many therapists actually told us that speech delay happens because parents are not reading enough to their children. So we wanted to create an app where real kids, like similar to like older brother or sister, would read you a story. So that's the story behind our two apps.
What do you think was the biggest strength of your product, even in the beginning, even if it was just an idea?
That was very clear from the beginning, that the app looks different than other kids apps. You have very cheap toys for kids that are also a little bit dangerous.
Yeah.
They are made of plastic, not sure what this plastic can do if the child chews on it, stuff like that. And then if you press on that toy, it makes, really weird noises and loud noises, and it's annoying, and it doesn't do anything good to the child. And then you have these wooden toys that have, high quality feeling to it, like the ones that are sold in IKEA, for example, Swedish kind of thing. I think our app basically has this feeling that it's more of a reality than a plastic thing. It's more of parents perceive it as a high quality screen time versus low quality screen time that can be experienced on YouTube and things like that.
When creating an app for kids, what are some of the key factors that you should always keep in mind in the development process?
So depends on how old kids are. For example, in our case, where kids are really young, you need to take the parent into account. So many times the parent is there. The parent also needs to feel the value. That's definitely one thing. And parent sees the value quite differently than the child. For the child, things need to be colorful, moving a lot, drag his attention, because with younger kids, as in our case, which are usually younger than 4, sometimes they're just 1 year old. We need to be more interesting than a cartoon. We need to be more interesting than their toys. You're actually competing with everything that is in his surroundings. So you need to make sure that things that are tappable are really clearly tappable, because they will try to tap anything. And if it doesn't lead them somewhere, they get lost, frustrated, and they leave your app. And then the parent sees, okay, my child doesn't like this app, he won't be using it anymore, and you're out of business. So this is maybe a tip from product perspective. Yeah, but when children get older, so if your target audience is, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, or even 3, kids become more, they can use it by themselves, and then the case is different. Then you can what we learned so far, I would say that there's a big difference between 1-year-old and 3-year-old. There's a big difference between 3-year-old and 5-year-olds. It's not just, when we started, it was like, okay, these are kids, all the same, preschoolers. But now we see, when we are observing them more and more closely, that there are big differences between different age groups.
As someone that's had co-founders, then what do you think are some of the pros and cons of having a co-founder?
I was thinking about this question a lot in the past years, because it's definitely not easy. I would compare it with the question, what are the pros and cons of getting married or being single? I would definitely say it's a very good thing to have co-founders. And the second thing I would say is that it's very good that you guys are not the same. Sometimes you see people from the same industry, like 5 engineers or 5 designers or 5, I don't know, engineers of some sort, mechanical engineer, 5 rocket scientists. If they make a company, I'm not sure if their rocket will fly to the moon, because they are thinking all the same. They went to the same school, they understand each other immediately. In our case, I think it was very good that we were different. We had designer, we had somebody who really didn't care about design, but cared a lot about business and numbers and things. And we had an engineer on the co-founding team. So we were different, which caused many problems. Just like, as I said, in a marriage, if two are very different, they need to learn how to live with the conflict, how to make something out of the conflict, how to make 2 + 1 + 1 is 3. So I think it's just a very good thing to have co-founders.
What advice do you have then for like emerging entrepreneurs that are looking to, have co-founders on their product?
I would say don't rush. This is a very typical thing that also an investor would tell you. But then a smart VC doesn't give money right away. He doesn't give money in 3 months. He just waits for a year and sees if these guys come back, and they're the same 2 guys who are still insisting on the same idea. Because when you have a startup, it usually takes 5 to 10 years, and a lot of luck and a lot of work to get somewhere where you imagine that you will be in 2 years. It never happens in 2 years, really rarely. So you need persistence. You need to be able to, you need people who can, suffer times without money, times without time, times without life even. So you need such people as co-founders, not people who are just, working, going to a startup, and people who are really driven by getting better and better each day at what they do. This is the kind of people that I would look for at a co-founder, and I think I found, and we found each other in that way, that we are all really not persistent. We don't give up really easily. That's basically our and that's what you need to look at with the co-founder. It's much more important than knowledge or which university and what grades he had or things like that.
How was 2020, the pandemic period, and kind of just this pre and post COVID period has been for Speech Pulse?
For us, it was a good year. It was a year where people. It was a good year because people were not reluctant anymore to use apps. Because before it was like, my child will not, my child should play outside. My child should be running around with friends, not using apps. But with Corona times, many families also, I'm a father of 4 boys, and we had, screen time became something more normal than it was. So this was good for us, especially at the beginning of the year. From team perspective, I would say it was the hardest year ever, because we were not used to work remotely, and we were always sticking together in our offices. But the coronavirus basically said, okay, you all be home and working from home, and this was something really hard to get used to it, and we are still not used to it. We still have problems with this.
Like how you said, work from home has been a challenge. Inside, sort of elaborating on that point, this sudden digital shift of the entire company, has that created any loopholes that you need to now fill in for, or certain challenges that you realized you didn't have before the pandemic?
It was, I would say that in a given day, people work more. So, there's no, distractions like, endless discussions on the balconies and things like that. But, people are like more focused when they work from home. But after a couple of months, just, motivation drops. And then, this is it's hard to have picnics. It's hard to do stuff like that. But we kind of managed to solve these problems with having workshops, having more one-on-one discussions, asking people intentionally and telling others, ask people that you work with, not just about the task at hand, but also about how they feel today. How are you today is something that you don't ask on Zoom calls as often as you do in real life. So, many people are alone, and they're different. Some, if you're a single young man, then you're alone at home. It can get really bad. If you have kids at home, you maybe cannot work as good as you did before because you get distractions and so on.
So then, as a product strategist, what are some of the key pointers that you always make sure that are there in a team or in the campaign that you're launching?
I would say that a very important thing is that when you are making a strategy, that you're not, the worst strategy is the one that you just came up and it really works good in your head. So that's always, when you have an idea, for a big move. So I would say time is very important. So it's important that you have enough time to get feedback on your hunches. So to get feedback from experts, from coworkers, from people who will develop it, from users, from customers. So having this research capabilities, for example, making focus groups. Focus group is something that, many talk about, but when you look into the companies, the bigger they are, the less they do research in-house. When companies are small, they say we don't have time for research, we have too many ideas. When they get bigger, they say, okay, research is not something we like doing, so we hire an external agency for that, or research company or something. So I would say that coming from validating ideas through research, either focus groups or user testing or things like very early, I think that's super important when you're doing anything with product. This is a very important part of the team. It also it's good to have research instead of showing off with your ego and your brain, because many times you have like a couple of smart people in the room, and they all have ideas, and sometimes ideas contradict. Ideas are cheap, but it's much better to just go on a call with the customer. It's sometimes hard to access them, but if you send enough emails, 10% of people will say yes, and you'll end up on a really insightful call, and then the next one and the next one. And after you meet your 10 customers, you learn a lot, and your intuition gets much better. And the discussions around the product and the strategy becomes focused on the customer, not on who has the biggest brain and better theory.
Yeah, and on that note, thank you so much again for taking out the time. And I really did enjoy the conversation a lot, even though there are tons of questions I could have asked more. But again, thank you so much. And yeah, that'll be all from me then.